All right, welcome back to the broadcast. We're thinking plug. And Josh, we're having an interesting conversation during the break, and I kind of want to talk about it with everybody else listening. But essentially, you know, we start looking at the fact that you have all these different archaeological discoveries that they're trying to hide. Of course, we were talking about the rock wall earlier, and then you see what's happening in Iraq. You know, I find it very fascinating because then you look at, well, who would be doing this? And then you look at the Vatican, you look at the Roman Catholic Church, and you see how these guys have this library that contains all these ancient manuscripts. It's very secretive of what is actually in this library. And this is an institution that has been around over 1,500 years, dates back to ancient Rome, is essentially an extension of ancient Rome. And, you know, it makes sense that if there's anybody that would want to hide the true nature of these archaeological findings, it would be the Roman Catholic Church, because they have this congregation of 1 billion plus people who they have under their brainwashing spell. And if any of this information comes out that contradicts all the BS that they've been spewing and filling people's minds with, they'd have some real major problems trying to maintain power and maintain their large congregation. What do you think?
Well, yeah, no question. And that's the whole thing that they're trying to do here. This is about the modern-day priest class that is keeping this ancient information hidden, giving the world this stuff called religion, and basically being that, okay, this is how we keep everything running. But when you look into what they control and how far back they've gone, that old statement, all roads lead to Rome, and they do all lead to Rome. Once you start looking in and finding out that you've got when the Vatican was set up, you had they went after the Templars. You remember that they went after the Templars and basically took what they had. The rest of it fled to Edinburgh, Scotland. It was interesting for me finding out that there was two Knights of Malta, that there's the Rome Knights of Malta, and then there's a Masonic Order of the Knights of Malta that are two different things. And inside of the Jesuit Knights of Malta oath, if you read it, it talks about, we are sworn to destroy all Protestants and Masons wherever we may find them. It actually says in their oath that we will slit their mothers' throats and tear open their wombs and smash their infants' heads against the walls of the Masons and the Protestants. It literally uses that language in their oath. So you start to see that that when you look into that kind of oath being taken against any group, it doesn't become a stretch when you start thinking about the fact that people forget that prior to the enemy of communism, people forget what the big enemy and the big outside threat was in this country and throughout the world through the predominant power structure. I bet there's not one. I bet there aren't too many people in our listening audience, and I'm not meaning to be mean by saying this, but there's not too many people who would know that the big enemy before communism was Protestantism. That was the big enemy. That was the shadowy enemy. In their day, before the commie threat, the threat was Protestantism. They were identifying Protestants throughout the world and identifying them as the enemy and going after them. And so when it became too obvious that that's what they were doing, they changed the threat to communism. And it was essentially arms and extensions of the same thing. And they usually used, the Rothschilds and the Zionists and that whole bloodline and the Jews as their front men. They put them out in front, made it believe that they had the perceived power. Meanwhile, these guys are in the back room pulling the puppet strings, and they're where the real power is. That's what the whole thing's, everybody talks about the Jews and the Jesuits. These people are all in this together, Lee.
Oh, definitely. Absolutely. And my research has concluded that is certainly the case. And, it's kind of funny because when you start looking back in like the 1500s and you see how Pope Paul IV, I was doing some research for my film on this, but Pope Paul IV, this is the guy that actually began this whole Jewish ghetto system. Okay? This is the Roman Catholic Church, the Vatican. And they did that for a few hundred years. So then you fast forward to the 1700s, and then you see the Rothschild family. And then this guy, Mayer Amschel Bauer, that was his real name, he all of a sudden changes it to Rothschild, which means Red Shield. And then you look at what Red Shield refers to. Well, it's interesting because you look at Roman soldiers, how they had red shields. Interesting coincidence there. So, there's a lot of information, evidence to indicate that the Rothschild family were essentially just put out there in front to be frontmen treasurers for the Vatican. I know you came across some research, Josh, with the Encyclopedia Judaica. I have not had a chance to look at this in black and white. I'm planning on going to a library to be 100% sure, but I've seen a lot of links and references to this online. But essentially, according to the Encyclopedia Judaica, according to the research of people who've looked into this, is that the name Rothschild means something like treasure, or like the Vatican's treasure, or guardian of the Vatican's treasure, I think is the exact terminology. So, I mean, you can't ignore all these links.
No, and you know what? I did look into that further, and I did find some things that I'd like to clarify on that. It was the fact that it because I had some arguments with people in the chat room about this. It wasn't that it says, maybe I misspoke when I first put this information out. I probably did, but if I did, I apologize. But it's not that the name means Guardians of the Vatican Treasury. It means Rothschild Red Shield. That's where the Bauer name changed over to. Allegedly, when one of them owned a shop and he looked up and saw a red shield and said, "I'm going to change my name to Red Shield." That's their cover story. No, you're exactly right. It's because the Romans had red shields. But so apparently, when you look it up in the Encyclopedia Judaica, under the description of Rothschild, I found several versions of the Encyclopedia Judaica online. I couldn't find one that had that reference in it, but from what I understand, there's a lot of different versions. But it basically describes them. It says Rothschilds, blah, 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 and it's basically, if you look at one of these things, it really is the encyclopedia of everything Jewish. I mean, I don't know who compiled this thing, and it seems strange to me because there's not a encyclopedia of African Americans or an encyclopedia of Anglo-Saxons, but they have the Encyclopedia Judaica, and it really is, if you never looked at one, it is all things Jewish.
Yeah, it's like 26 volumes or something, 26 volumes long.
And it's ridiculous, the detail, Lee, that they go into describing any and all connections to Judaism into people who are Jewish. And so when you look up the Rothschilds, that's what it says. It talks about how they're connected to Judaism, and then it says guardians of the Vatican treasury.
Well, that's even more interesting, I think, if it's a description describing Rothschild, because if it doesn't directly mean that it's the guardians of the Vatican treasury, the fact that it's a description of them, I think, is just as damning.
Yeah, if not more, because, I mean, this is basically them explaining as if, that's the whole thing. When you think about why it would say Guardians of the Vatican Treasury, to me, you get the impression that among people in the know, specifically in the likes of Judaism and people who speak Hebrew, you get the idea that almost the intercorrelations between their faith and what their religious hierarchy pushes and what they follow is known fact that it's intermingled with the Vatican and with Catholicism. It's almost like it's an inside joke, almost like they're saying, yeah, Guardians of the Vatican Treasury, you reading this will know that the Catholic Church, Judaism is just an extension of the Catholic Church. I mean, it really does almost seem like an inside thing, doesn't it, Lee?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, these people, this is what they do. A lot of what they put out there in the corporate control media, what's put out there in the educational system, and its false view of reality that they put out there, it's really meant to be an inside joke. A lot of the stuff that you see, when you start digging into what's really going on, then you start looking at the corporate control media again, and it almost looks like this fantasy version of reality. It's like a movie version that they put out there for all the people. And it's like a spell. It's like a brainwashing spell that they put out there to get people distracted and not to really look deeper into what's going on. And unfortunately, they've been very effective at it.
Well, they've been extremely effective at it. We're coming on a break again, I know, here in just a minute, Lee, but when we come back from the break, we were talking about some other stuff on the last break. I'd like to talk about the new Dan Brown prequel, Da Vinci Code, Angels and Demons on the other side.
Yes, that'd be an interesting subject because that film's going to be coming out, and I guess what we'll do is we'll wait till after the break to get into it. But yeah, essentially the new film Angels and Demons, I've seen the trailers for it. You got the Illuminati in there, and apparently the Vatican and their sworn enemy, the Illuminati, are going at each other. And of course, we know that's just a bunch of crap and nonsense. But we'll get into that on the other side, I promise. You're listening to Oracle Unplugged. I'm joined here with Josh Reeves, the host of the Global Reality Show. And folks, we will be right back. Stay with us.